I wasn't nervous
commentaries.
about this until I started putting the little, I was like doing the little, I don't, I have like an outline, but I was like, it'll be fine. And then I was like, author, podcaster, film historian, television expert, commentator. And I was like, oh no.
Well, they're all kind of the same thing, to be honest. They all come from just one kind of spot inside me that is passionate about something, and they're all branched off from that. And they all generally hit, like, there's two subjects I mainly do, which is the TV movie stuff, which is what I'm most passionate about, what I have I guess I'm most known for that, but also I do like horror movies, but in general I do slashers, and every so often I veer off that, but not very often. And also for some reason rape revenge movies have become a big thing.
Yeah. What if that's like I guess TV was kind of the found. Let me give you a proper introduction. We're just gonna kick it off. We're
Okay.
talking to Amanda Reyes. You are the author, the editor of Are You in the House Alone? A TV movie compendium 1964 to 1999. You are also you're a film historian. You're a television history historian. History historian. That's two words for the same thing.
I like
I'm
it
gonna
though.
stack here of your commentaries as well. We'll get into all of this, but I am just delighted to talk to you. I have such admiration for you. Thank you again for taking the time to talk to me.
Thank you for bringing me on. I'm super excited to be here.
So let's go. I guess TV came first, right? Like like that has to be the foundation, like the golden age of television and the TV movie and all that stuff.
For me and my interests, yeah, I guess TV movies. So I'm old enough to remember not the ABC movie of the week when it originally aired, but I was old enough to have just 3 channels plus a local station and a really good programmer at our local station who played movies like Gargoyles and Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. And so when I was very little, Trilogy of Terror. So I was exposed to like these really great horror films, and that was my gateway. But I kind of went the long way around because, I was also a teenager in the 80s. So like slasher movies became a great love of mine. And so TV movies kind of went by the wayside for a while. And I kind of never really thought about the roots of my love of horror until much, much later. I was in my 30s, and TV movies were becoming a great source of comfort for me. My parents had passed away very close together. And so I found myself going back and watching a lot of these movies. And I started a blog, and it all kind of grew from there. But yeah, it was the foundation. It's just I didn't recognize it was the foundation for like 2 decades, until I started kind of needing them again. And then from there, I realized that there was kind of a need for people to talk about these. And my writing was really rough, and it probably still is kind of rough. I'm never happy with it, but like I just wanted to get it out there. And it seemed like I was the only person really concentrating heavily on these movies. And I veered so I called it Made for TV Mayhem, and I'm really glad I did, because I was going to call it something like Teleterrors, but then that would have really stuck me in horror, and I ended up getting to write about whatever I wanted on my blog. And from there I started to really expand my knowledge of TV movies to the point that it's never enough for me. And every time I watch one that I haven't seen before, it's like actually really exciting to like kind of put a little notch on my belt, put it in the back of my mind, figure out how I can incorporate it into the work that I do. And so, yeah, it kind of just really grew and grew and grew, and it's still growing, which I'm really pleased about.
Why do you think that horror is such a gateway, genre entertainment and horror entertainment for movies? People use the universal horror movies as a gateway into classic film. Why do you think that horror is such an approachable genre?
I think that's a good question. There's a fascination with the unknown, but I think also like when you're a kid, it's kind of taboo. And so like my parents would let me watch the TV movies because they were made for TV, so that they seemed safer. But they were watching stuff like Trilogy of Terror. It's like, what are you doing to my 7-year-old brain, Mom? You know what I mean? But so I think there's a combination of a lot of things. One, fear is like, depending on who you are, fear can either be really cathartic at a young age, or it could be something that you haven't experienced yet. And so there's a fascination with what that is. And there's sort of something adult about the genre. So it's allowing you to express adult emotions at a young age. But also that fascination with the unknown that I think for people who stay fans of any genre, subgenre of horror, is that idea of confronting something inside themselves in that film, whatever chosen genre that is. And that's why I love horror, because it's so subjective. Like people love the classic Universal monsters. They're great. People love slashers. People love the gritty B movies. People want to see just the bigger budgeted thrillers. Like there's something for everyone in there, and we tap into it because of something inside ourselves. It's one of the only genres that I know of that really speaks to the heart of the darkness inside of us, in unique ways.
I love that. I think that's great. We can cut this out if you don't want to answer this question, but I noticed we're talking about like defining horror and there being so many different kinds of horror for different people. I bet that you've run up against this, but there's all these gatekeepers who are now going like, that's not horror, or, like, that's not my horror or something like that. Do you have any observations on that you'd be willing to share?
Gatekeeping is really interesting. I've been really lucky because TV movies are kind of like unknown, and not a lot of people have really pursued it the way I have, and so I'm opening doors for people. And I don't think it's been gatekept as heavily as things like slashers. But as a woman interested in slashers for a long time, it was a really interesting place to be. And I remember actually I worked at a bookstore in LA, and I can't remember his name, and I wouldn't say it anyway, but he came and got a job there. He worked there for a few weeks, and he was talking about horror movies, and he mentioned something about 60B grindhousey or drive-in films. And I told him I loved Herschel Gordon Lewis. And he told me, oh, you've probably seen one of his films, and now you're acting like you're like a big fan. And he actually said it in a very loud, aggressive manner. And I was taken aback. I couldn't even respond to that. And I'm very non-confrontational anyway. And I was really upset because I consider myself I'm not the biggest fan of his films, but I was a really big fan of his horror. I am still, of his horror films. And as a matter of fact, I have a pet rat named Montag, after Montag from The Wizard of Gore. So I'm a fan, but like, that was one of the first times I can remember being like given a brick wall. Like, you can't go past this point because you're a girl, or because, whatever. And at the time I didn't know a lot of other women who were into it. And so there was some aggression. I don't see it in my own personal day-to-day too much, although I think now, doing what I do, I have started to see a little bit of gatekeeping and a little bit of sexism. And I find that it's sort of painful. But at the same time, I kind of recognize where it's coming from. And it's just a thing. I think gatekeeping it's hard to maintain in a world where everybody can connect now. Mm-hmm. And so I think social media, like, you can gatekeep and you can bitch about female commentators or people talking about feminism in your slasher films, but you're going to get a lot of pushback now. So it's a lot harder to claim this as yours, which I find really empowering, if that answers your question.
It does. And you said empowering. And I was going to say, I noticed like your commentaries. I love your commentaries because you hit hard. And there's commentary. There's a lot of different approaches. I'm not going to say one is right or wrong or one is better than the other. There are some people who just read IMDb trivia and they're like, this person was in so-and-so with so-and-so. You do so much research. And I was just wondering if those experiences that you're talking about, like, you feel like you have more to prove and it just makes you more, I was going to say, like, aggressive in your approach to these things.
I didn't even realize I was aggressive or I hit hard. So I've never heard that. Like, I consider myself pretty timid, actually. And when I do these, I think I'm just really passionate about the films, and I just want to talk about everything. But also at the same time, a lot of these movies, particularly TV movies, don't have a lot of documentation. So I have to find all these other things about the films because I'm talking for 90 minutes that I think will be interesting. And also I'm an academic, so subtext just comes in to play in a lot of it. And some people really like it. Some people don't. I don't know, but I don't know how else to approach. I watch films from a very personal point of view. It's almost like you're reading a diary, when I talk about movies. So it's hard for me to think about doing it any other way, but there's some really great commentaries where it's very production history based, and they know everything about the film. And if the film's been really well documented, I'm happy to talk about that aspect of it. But a lot of times you just have to wing it and be like, oh, this is a really interesting moment in the movie. Oh, it's really interesting that he shot it this way. What does this tie into to other, things? But thank you for saying that. I had no idea that I was like giving you this hard edge or whatever I was doing over there.
I don't want to mean, like, when I say aggressive, I don't mean like, angry or anything that. Let me say passionate. I'm going to go back and overdub it. Passionate. That's what it'll say. like some people are very, like it's like an almanac, like a human almanac, and they're just reading off statistics and stuff. And then other people, you feel passion and you feel connection. And I get those from your comments. Maybe because I'm the same way, I connect with that. But thank you. I appreciate that approach.
Well, thank you for saying that. It means
You're
a
welcome.
lot.
So we're talking about TV movies. I'm curious. This is actually one of the questions I asked for questions from my Patreon supporters, and let me make sure I attribute this to the right person. This was from Jim. He was curious, and I'm curious as well. TV movies, some of them are very hard to find, or they have been. We're living in kind of a renaissance right now where, like The Victim gets a Blu-ray from Kino Lorber, and it's a great commentary track there. But for a lot of this stuff, I imagine finding it and seeing it was a challenge if you didn't see it first run, back in the day.
I got really lucky because I was in LA, and I think it's still there, but Eddie Brandt's Saturday Matinee is a video store, and they had what was called the loaner list. And the loaner list was basically, so they got all these donations. People would come in with like bags of VHS tapes of home video where they would just have tape stuff off TV. And they were like, Donovan was running the store at the time, Donovan Brandt. And they would be like, Donovan, here's a bunch of VHS tapes that I don't know what to do with them and I don't want to throw them out. And they would have all this stuff on them. So it was illegal to rent them. But if you rented a movie, for every movie you rented, you could pick something off the loaner list and keep it for the same length of time. So it turned out that a lot of these wonderful people that just taped everything brought in a lot of TV movies. And so I would go there and I would rent like the Hardy Boys Volume 2 or whatever. And then I would get, Bad Ronald. And so when I first started getting back into TV movies, that was how I got into it. And also eBay at the time was still selling a lot of bootlegs. And boy, let me tell you, getting Bad Ronald it took like a year for me because people were paying like $80 for bootlegs of it because it was so hard to find, even though it had a home video release. As a matter of fact, one of the video stores where I grew up carried it and somebody stole it. Like it was just impossible to find that movie. So at the time, eBay and Eddie Brandt's really were able to give me access to stuff. And then since then, YouTube has come along, and there's different, and I don't want to promote bootlegging. But if things aren't available, you have to use these measures. You know what I mean? So luckily, all these boutique labels like Kino Lorber and Scream Factory and some other labels have been doing the Lord's work. By Vinegar Syndrome has started to get into it by picking up some of these titles. But even though I agree that we're in kind of a Renaissance period, we're talking about at least 5,000 TV movies just from 1964 to 1999. And how many of them have come out on home video? I mean, just a handful, so there's still a lot of work to be done. But luckily, there's people uploading stuff and putting stuff out. And Amazon Prime for a while had really good stuff. Now Tubi's picked it up. So there are places now to find things. We are in a much better spot to start rediscovering these movies.
It's kind of a good call to action too, because I see, I deal with a lot of the collecting aspect and the reviewing of the new discs and stuff like that. And this is a great time for people to actually show support for these things by buying them and actively. I say you vote with your wallet. If you like, well, I'm going to wait for a sale. You can wait for a sale. We all have to do what we have to do. But if you're not supporting things as they come out, then there's no signal to the companies that are licensing these things from the parent companies that there's an audience for that. So, you vote with your dollar. And I want to vote, man. I have had such a good time kind of discovering some of these movies in high definition. I mean, who would have thought high def for some of this?
I know. Even when these movies originally came out, a lot of us had these really crappy TV sets. I still have my old, it sits on the floor. It's like 2 tons and it works. And we watched movies like on little tiny TVs, I guess like we watch on our phone now, but like in the kitchen, everybody had that little phone, or I'm sorry, TV. And you do dishes and you'd watch the ABC movie of the week. And you can't imagine when you see it in high def, how beautiful these movies look and how much work went into movies that had 10-day shooting schedules. It's really impressive, the workmanship that went into making these movies week after week. And so when companies like Kino Lorber, and some of them, they can't even do on Blu-ray because they don't have all the elements, but they will release a DVD of it, like Amazon's is a good example. And to have that come out and to see the beautiful photography in that film, Paul Michael Glazer's first film directing, and it was just stunning. And it opens up a new appreciation for like the work. So yeah, I'm thrilled with all these companies doing that.
On that note, let me cut to another question here that was sent in. This is from Jeff. What TV movies would you consider to be true gems for someone who is just starting to check out the format?
That's
You
a
have any?
good question. Yeah, because people are always asking me to recommend movies, and I'm always hesitant because my taste might not be your taste. But there's the classics. Depending on if you like things that are sort of gritty, I would suggest something like Bad Ronald, Nightmare in Badham County, and Born Innocent, because those are really notorious films for a good reason, and they're also really good. All of them are stunning. If you My personal favorite films, I guess a good gateway, I guess the movie I would always fall back on might be Dark Knight of the Scarecrow, because I think everybody loves that movie. I've never met anybody who's seen it and has had a bad opinion of it. And it's a tough one to recommend as a TV movie because it was actually meant to be a theatrical. It was envisioned as a theatrical. They weren't finding the backers for it or something like that, and they ended up making it for TV. So they had kind of higher aspirations. So it has a filmic quality to it that you don't always see in other films, but it's stunning. It's got great acting. It's a legitimately really, really amazing film that kind of transcends how it was made and where it was made. And people tend to love it. But there's also some really neat oddball movies. Like there's a movie called Do Not Fold, Spindle, or Mutilate, which just came out. And I don't know who the company was that released it, but they put it with the Snoop Sisters, the release of that short-lived series, because it stars two of the actresses from that. Mildred Natwick and Helen Hughes, I think, and Helen Hayes, I'm sorry. And that's a really weird, fabulous, fun movie. That's kind of a precursor to the Golden Girls, like if they were drunk all the time and were like playing pranks on people. And it's about a bunch of women who create a fake woman for a computer dating service, and then they end up luring a psycho who wants to meet this woman who doesn't exist, and he starts pursuing these older women, and it's amazing. And then there was stuff like that came out in the late 60s. Another one I really like is Honeymoon with a Stranger with Janet Leigh and Eric Braeden and Barbara Steele. And that was before the TV movie really became a factory. So they had like this crazy, a lot of the movies that came out in the 60s were they went around the world shooting them, like Italy, and this one takes place in Spain. And it's about a woman whose husband, she just gets married, and her husband goes out to like get some groceries, and he comes back and it's a different person. And she's like, well, you're not my husband. And then the movie's about that. And it's got Rosanna Brazzi in it. I mean, it's amazing. I'm trying to think other movies like Fantasies from 1982 is one of my favorites with Suzanne Pleshette. It's a kind of a slasher, but it's also a meta film about the soap opera industry using real soap opera actors as soap actors in it. That's really good. My favorite movie is This House Possessed. Yeah, I feel like I'm just throwing out titles, but like there's so many. I think Dark Knight of the Scarecrow would be a good starting spot. And then maybe expanding from there. Don't Go to Sleep is another one people love with Valerie Harper and Dennis Weaver.
I showed my daughter the Dark Knight of the Scarecrow when she was like 6, because it's
Ooh.
relatively clean, like it's not.
But it's scary.
Well, it made a connection too. Like
Yeah.
she loves it, and she still loves it now. She still brings it up sometimes, and it's like this. It was that was one of her gateways, and so I agree with that. That's a good one. What's the one with is it? Are You Afraid of the Dark? And Warner Archive put it out recently, and it's about these little people that live in this
Yeah.
house.
Don't Be
Oh
Afraid
my
of the
goodness,
Dark.
that freaked me out. That was ugh.
That's the first movie I can remember. I either saw that or Gargoyles when I was like 4, and I was still living in California. And I didn't end up watching the whole movie because it was so scary. And it was like kind of like this and changing the channel. And I remember afterwards I watched The Monkeys because just as a palate cleanser. And then I didn't watch it for years. And then I found a bootleg of it at Kim's Video in New York when I went there in 2002, and I bought it. And my friend and I literally sat on his bed with our eyes like this because all those memories of watching it as a kid were still with me. And I did the commentary for that release. And, that was like an honor because the filmmaker of that, John Newland, is one of my favorite filmmakers. And I didn't know that until I did the commentary because I started watching everything he did. And it turned out that he's just this really amazing, versatile filmmaker. And it was such a pleasure to like talk about him on that commentary.
Like, speaking of these directors, like how many pilots and TV movies did John Llewellyn Moxley direct?
Well, he would
Like,
probably be the most prolific one that comes to mind. There were a couple of others. I feel like David Lowell Rich and some other names that are escaping me might have been almost as prolific, but it just seemed like that guy was working. These filmmakers sometimes made 3, 4, 5 movies a year because the shooting schedules were so short and the pre and post production were just like this. So they were constantly working. And I think there's one year where John Llewellyn Moxie did like 4 or 5 movies in one. I mean, that blows my mind. And they're all great. Like he has a couple movies that are, yeah, that's okay, but there's no dogs at all. He just knew what he was doing. And there were a lot of filmmakers that did that. That was their bread and butter for that decade, particularly in the 70s and into the 80s and 90s. They worked a lot. But yeah, I don't know how many movies he made, but it's stunning the amount of TV films that guy made.
And as you say, they're all competent. I feel like there's some, I'm going to touch on this like later as we're wrapping up, because I want to kind of compare things to how maybe they are now in the streaming world. But there was a competency there. There was this, because it was a machine, as you say, like they were kind of gearing up this machine to serve this weekly platform. And I just feel like those, even the TV shows from that era have such a cinematic quality. It feels like you're watching something that really has professionalism behind it, and I think that's Absolutely. One of the things that we connect with. Do you have talking about TV like pilots? This is from Nate. Nate was kind of curious. They're packaged TV pilots, or the Incredible Hulk or Buck Rogers, Battlestar Galactica. They put the pilot together into this like feature for foreign markets. Mm-hmm. Any thoughts on that? Do you like that? Or
I love it. I actually got to see Battlestar Galactica twice on the big screen. It's like 2.5 hours or something like that. And the first time I saw it at the American Cinematheque, and they had most of the cast. And I think Glenn A. Larson might have been there too. I'm trying to remember, so long ago now. No. And it looks so beautiful. There's just one special effect when it's blown up for the big screen that you're like, oh, wow, that looks really bad. But other than that, it was so beautiful. And I would love to see Buck Rogers on the big screen. I remember that opening theme song, which is different from the one they used in the series. But yeah, Duel played overseas theatrically, and also Stranger in Our House, which was known better, I think, here, Summer of Fear. And I can never remember which title came first, but that played theatrically. There's a couple Gargoyles played overseas. I love the idea of it. And one of the things I will tell you is when my book was first coming out, I did a launch for it in Australia, which was great. And I went there and I met a woman who told me that TV movies, because so many of them come out in the theater and also they come out of Hollywood, a lot of people in other countries don't see them as quote unquote TV movies, which is kind of considered derogatory. They see them as movies coming out of Hollywood, and they have a much different kind of respect for them because of that. And they see them as a piece of cinema. And a lot of them did come out, like Madam Sin is another one with Betty Davis and Robert Wagner. In fact, I'm going to recommend that to that other person that asked. That's a wackadoodle freaking movie, and everybody should see it. It's weird and it's gorgeous, and it's about, well, anyway, he can look it up. It's crazy. But anyway, but it still plays on TV in London, because somebody contacted me a few years ago and they said, my mom is watching Madam Sin on TV right now, and I'm like, oh, that's crazy. So there's a different appreciation for TV movies over there because of how they were released and where they came from. Mm-hmm. So I love the idea of these movies, pilots and other TV movies playing theatrically. And I wish more of them would come here to the repertory houses. I know Gargoyles has. I've seen that on the big screen. I haven't seen Duel on the big screen, but I know that's had a couple releases here in the States. So yeah, I really like it. It's really cool. I think it gives the people a new appreciation of the artistry.
Mm-hmm. This question goes back to what we were talking about a second ago, but so Mike wants to know, he's a huge fan of Dan Curtis Productions, TV horror movies. Are there any other producers or directors that he should seek out? We kind of talked a little bit about that. Any more?
Yeah, I guess right now I'm doing a retrospective on Aaron Spelling with the Austin Film Society, and he actually undercover produced well over 200 made-for-TV movies, and a lot of them are genre films. And matter of fact, we're showing one at the end of this month, February, The House That Wouldn't Die, which is John Llewellyn Moxie, which stars Barbara Stanwyck, and it's amazing. And he made some really important TV movies. He did The Boys in the Band, and he did The Best Little Girl in the World. I hope I got that title right, with Jennifer Jason Leigh, which is about anorexia. It was a huge film when it came out. It was the first of its kind. But he also did a lot of these genre films, and a lot of them are really good. He's the producer. I guess the other one, he just passed away, and oh my God, his name has totally escaped me. Charles Fries, Fries. I always say Fries, it might be Fries. He did a lot of TV movies, like The Initiation of Sarah is one that I'm thinking of. He did Are You in the House Alone? He's considered the godfather of the made-for-TV movie because he produced so many of them. And he did a lot of genre work as well, and some just dramas and stuff. He had a very wide variety of films he did, like Aaron Spelling. I think that those are two really interesting producers that he might want to seek out. I can't think of any other ones off the top of my head, but those are the two that come to mind. Very prolific.
When you mentioned Barbara Stanwyck, you just kind of reminded me that so many of these TV movies had stars of the golden age of Hollywood, kind of maybe on their way down, or I don't know if that's a fair way to look at it. It kind of seems that way to me. You know, you come to TV in your later years. Have any of these movies like led you to golden age of Hollywood stuff? Like you see a Barbara Stanwyck movie, to go, I want to check out more Barbara Stanwyck because she's been around since the beginning, you know?
Absolutely. Those I think it's okay to say that, because I think even the actor said it. It was either Joseph Cotton or Walter Pidgeon for The Screaming Woman. I think they're both in that with Olivia de Havilland, and that was her first TV movie. They were saying that work was really drying up for them on the big screen, and TV was, and Aaron Spelling was really into embracing them as well. He put them on Love Boat, and he tried to use them as best he could. Yeah, it was such a gateway, especially like that movie I'm talking about, Do Not Fold, Spindle, or Mutilate. It's Sylvia Sidney, Myrna Loy, Helen Hayes, and Mildred Natwick. And that just opened so many doors, like to see them in that film all together. Like I already had a pretty good appreciation for Myrna Loy, but a lot of them I hadn't seen their earlier work, and they're fantastic. And yeah, so like I do think that it's a different kind of gateway. And for kids, growing up in that era, it probably did, I say more so than now, opened up a lot of that. Oh my God, she's so good in this. I need to go see Olivia de Havilland and everything, because wow. And also it was a really great avenue. It's kind of going on a little tangent. I'll make it brief, but it's a really great avenue for a lot of TV actors who were pigeonholed. And like Robert Reed went out of his way to make a lot of TV movies where he was not Mr. Brady, right? Like Secret Nightcaller is a big one where he's a really dark character study that's so good. Pray for the Wildcats, even Nightmare in Badham County, which he has a small part in that. I think he plays a Hugh Hefner-like character in Death of a Centerfold with Jamie Lee Curtis. And he purposely sought out roles that you wouldn't recognize him for. Like you thought, oh, he's just this really sweet dad. Oh my God, look at this. He's such a good actor. You know what I mean? And so if the actors were, as you say, feeling like they were on the decline, they were still giving a lot. They were given great meaty roles on TV. So even though it might be seen as a lesser medium, I think the material could sometimes be really strong. Mm-hmm.
That's great. Yeah. We're winding down. I want to ask, so I sent you this behind the scenes. So Josh Jeb Kuga is he's a writer for IDW. He worked on the adaptation, the comics adaptation of Bubba Hotep and the Cosmic Bloodsuckers with Joe Lansdale.
Yeah, I love Joe Lansdale.
It's great stuff. That's my favorite thing he's done too. He worked on a Scarface prequel comic. He worked on a Mummy comic book as well. Good friend of he's one of my good friends and a good friend of the show. But he had this lengthy. He had seen an episode of. He saw something. He just remembered Elvira was kind of introducing it. It was maybe 2 segments. There was I got the note. I'm not going to read the whole email, but it was like there was a guy that's dry. He thinks it's England. Maybe this guy runs out of gas and walks into town. Maybe they're vampires. And then there's another segment where he remembers this guy. They're like, don't go into the basement. He finally goes into the basement, and this kid's granddad who's like pops out of the coffin. Any thoughts on what this was? We kind of talked a little bit about it.
Actually, now that you're talking about the vampire one, not the vampire one, the first one.
Yeah.
No, I don't think it's it. There was like an Amicus film, and I can't remember any of the actors in it, about but I think the guy murders somebody, and then he goes to a town, and then he finds out that everybody's a vampire. I don't want to be too spoilery. That's that. Yeah. So maybe I'm mixing up the two that he's describing. What I think it is he mentioned it was from England. It might be a Hammer House of Horror. And I think he's probably right, because I was trying to look it up, and I saw that Elvira would put 2 episodes of the show together. And that might be why it felt like an anthology to him. But I couldn't find anything. And it doesn't necessarily strike a bell. And then I wonder, because there was like it's so like, for instance, there is an episode of a British TV show called Thriller called Dial a Deadly Number that I saw as a kid that really had an impact on me. And at the same time, I also saw a movie called Scream Pretty Peggy. And as the years passed, I actually merged the two films together, and it took like 2 decades for me to separate them because I kept looking for this movie, but I was actually thinking of two different films. So I don't know if that's what he's doing too, but it's likely a Hammer House of Horror, and I wish I could help more, but nothing struck a chord with me.
Yeah. I confused the two movies that I watched last week, So I watched so much stuff. I've done like six in a day before, and then they invariably are just gonna blend together.
Yeah, I feel horrible about that. I'm so bad with can you help me with this movie? And it's funny because somebody will say, "Oh, that's this," and I'll be like, "Oh yeah, that's what it is." Like it'll all just make sense, but I'm really bad about naming movies for people.
Well, we're putting it out there for other people that can weigh in on this too. So if you guys are watching this,
please.
like, oh, that's that had Peter Cushing in it. Did it? I don't know. Okay, last question, and I think this is a good for the historical perspective of it. I think that this is from Nathan. Do you see any comparison between today's limited TV series like Pam and Tommy and the old TV miniseries or movies?
Yeah, that's a really good angle because I never thought of it as a miniseries as such. But the one thing I will say, so I don't watch a lot of new TV at all. I watch Young and the Restless. I love my soaps, but I don't watch like I watched the first season of Stranger Things, but I don't really dive into TV now. And is it TV because it's on? It's a whole rigmarole, and you have to ask a lot of questions. But what I like so much about shows like Stranger Things and probably Pam and Tommy and all of these like interesting things that come out streaming is the community that's been built from it. And so when I was in the heyday of the TV movie, when we only had 3 channels, everybody was watching the same thing. And so, like for instance, the night that The Night Stalker premiered, there was something like 46% of Americans or something who had televisions were watching it that night. So that's like half of America. So you went to work the next day and you're like, God, I saw this crazy vampire movie with Darren McGavin and it was so good. And then you're likely the person standing next to you was like, yeah, I saw it too. That was really amazing. And now we're just doing it in a different way. So everybody is like House of Gucci or whatever. You hear one person mentions it, and then before you know it, everybody's watching it. And they're all getting online and they're all talking about, this was so good. I loved it. I loved it so much. And so like Pam and Tommy, I'm just starting to hear about, and a lot of people are talking about it. And Stranger Things was a big one. And what I love about it, and all of those Star Wars shows, people just eat them up. And even though I don't watch them, it's so amazing for me to go like on Twitter or on Facebook and see everybody talking about these shows, usually in really positive ways. And it feels so good to feel like we can still connect, especially now when everything feels so divisive in this world. It's really nice to see the people still connecting over these shows and these miniseries and these limited run, whatever you want to call them, streaming on Netflix and Hulu. And so that's what I see. I see community building. And I feel like we may look at TV back then as something really antiquated, but at the heart of it, it's really about how we can connect with each other as people through like an art form. And now we're doing it again with these shows. And I have so much love for that. So I think it's amazing. And that's what's drawing me to like wanting to follow people talking about it and kind of, even though I don't participate myself. And that's the connection I see for him.
Well, that's the passion that I was talking about when I was referencing your commentaries and stuff. That's such a wonderful, uplifting
thank you.
Into this interview. Thank you so much for that. Tell people, you have so much going on. So tell people where you want them to get the book, where they can listen to your podcast. Let's just plug away.
Okay, well, my book is available on Amazon, but you can also get it through Head Press, which is a UK publisher. And a big shout out to them for giving me a chance to put that book together. That was a real pleasure. There's a lot of wonderful authors in it, and I've been really happy with the reception of it. I have a podcast. It's just called the Made for TV Mayhem Show. And I don't remember the URL, but you can just Google it and we'll show up. I think we're only on Stitcher and Apple Podcasts because I'm not savvy enough to really do other things. I don't really do my blog too much, but that's just madefortvmayhem.com. But I'm on Twitter. So you can find me at Made for TV Mayhem on Facebook, at Made for TV Mayhem on Twitter, and at Made for TV Mayhem on Instagram. And that's where I like plug things. If I find something really interesting, like a factoid about Donna Mills or somebody really interesting who made a TV movie, I'll post it there and try to share it. And also promote when my podcast is available with links and stuff like that. And then in terms of just like my commentaries and stuff, I guess I announced them on there too. Right now, the only things that are like pending that have been announced that I can think of offhand I did a commentary for a theatrical movie called Lipstick with Justin Kurzweil from The Story Continues. That ended up being a really amazing experience for me. Margot Hemingway is amazing, and it's kind of an important film that has some TV movie ties to it. So that was really great for me to cover that. And I did the liner notes for a slasher film called Deadly Games that came out in 1982. That Arrow did this amazing. If you've ever seen the movie, you couldn't really see what was happening in it, and now you see how beautiful the film is, and it makes a lot more sense. And so those were the two things I have that are upcoming.
Okay, and I'll put links to all that in the description of this video so people can just scroll down and it'll all be there. Amanda Reyes, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. Stick around. I want to say goodbye and thank you off the air, but thank you. And guys, continue this conversation in the comments below. Let us know your favorite TV movies. Let us know. Yeah, I mean, recommend this stuff. This stuff lives. I always like to say this stuff lives through the fans. Like, we recommend things, we keep this alive. So share your passion, share your love for it in the comments below, and we'll keep this train going. So thank you, Amanda. Thank you guys. And until next time, we will catch you later.
Thank you.